people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
To the mother relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Some inside intel from Boxing Insider. Rick Glaser, who says, it seems Mr. Tank Davis needs a very strong dance partner to be able to sell pay-per-view, as Tank tanked, selling slightly less than 150,000 pay-per-view buys, and it doesn't bode well for David Benavidez either, as he was the co-feature. Remember,
you're not that guy, pal. Trust me, you're not that guy.
Tank only did 61,000 buys versus Hector Luis Garcia in January of last year. Just 3 months before, Ryan Garcia did that astronomical 1.2 million buys. Besides a real dance partner, piracy is a huge problem. Price point was way too high, fighting someone with no name recognition, and there's way too many boxing pay-per-views this year from multiple promoters. And the last one.
You're not that guy, pal. Trust me, you're not that guy.
Consumer resentment regarding pay-per-view, both creating a very saturated market for pay-per-view. Tank absolutely now needs Loma to sell a pay-per-view. I said from the onset that in my opinion, it would do under 200,000 buys. Just maybe, the PBC Brain Trust learned an important lesson, an expensive one. Don't use no-name fighters in pay-per-view main events. Now, more than ever, Tank needs Loma to sell the pay-per-view.
Does he think he is Canelo?
Think you're the face of boxing? You're the face of degeneracy. You're the face of pay-per-view piracy, because it's funny that so many people seem to know what happens in a Gervonta Davis fight, but so few people seem to buy them.
How do you know?
The numbers are low. So how do you reconcile the numbers being low, but everybody knowing what happened? Everybody seems to have saw what took place. Well, that's because most of them are stealing it.
These diehard Gervonta Davis fans, diehard Gervonta Davis bots on Boxing Twitter, here on YouTube.
Oh, you can't say anything derogatory, disparaging about Gervonta Davis online without a bunch of faceless bots trying to argue with you about it. If only you bums had jobs, and if only you used the money from those jobs to buy Gervonta Davis's fights instead of stealing them, then perhaps he would be the face of boxing. But he isn't.
That's what the evidence shows. From 1.2 million with Ryan Garcia all the way down to less than 200,000.
It's a pretty steep drop, wouldn't you say? This is the second set of ballpark figures, ballpark numbers, that's been put out there by those in the loop, those in the know. The other came from Jedi Goodman, who keeps up with the metrics in combat sports. All of combat sports, not just boxing. He put out a similar figure a little over a week ago.
Same range, same neighborhood.
Which is believable because it is in keeping with Gervonta Davis's previous numbers for his previous pay-per-views, not including Ryan Garcia. So Ryan, in his last fight with Devin Haney, sold more than Gervonta just did in his last fight with Frank Martin.
Is Ryan the face of boxing?
Tell you what, Ryan is closer to being the face of boxing right now than Gervonta Davis, but in the end, neither of them are the face of boxing. It's still Canelo.
It is.
The number that's out there, the ballpark figure for Canelo Alvarez's last fight, is in the neighborhood of 500,000.
Coincidentally, the ballpark figure for Haney versus Garcia, it's close to that neighborhood.
It's close to it, whereas Gervonta has put up the lowest numbers of the three. So how is he the face of boxing?
He isn't.
And he never was, and he never will be.
Will this be enough to draw him out, draw him off the island? That his pay-per-view was a categorical flop?
Rick Glaser continued, in talking to several executives since yesterday, Gervonta Davis is simply not the pay-per-view star that he's made out to be. The reasons from those executives are listed here in no particular order. Tank appeals to a small demographic.
A broke one.
All those guys do is watch boxing on illegal streams, so what good are they?
What good is a fan base like that?
But that's one. Two, he has no mouthpiece speaking for Tank to promote him properly. 3, too long in between his fights. It takes too long. He didn't fight in 13 months.
That's 3.
4. He needs to fight much bigger names than he has been fighting. 5. More meaningful fights.
Which is the same as 4, but that's 5.
6. Of course, piracy. But they are paying to watch Canelo, and that's the difference.
Canelo's fans aren't bums and thieves. Gervonta's fans are.
Bums.
7. Not enough media push is put into his fight announcements.
It's obvious why. Well, you're not with Mayweather Promotions anymore, and the PBC just ain't what it used to be. This Amazon deal, it's not the same as the Showtime deal.
Amazon don't push PBC the same way that Showtime did.
So naturally, there's not much media push for a PBC pay-per-view, namely a Gervonta Davis pay-per-view here today. That was 7. 8. Too many boxing pay-per-view events. The consumer is picking and choosing very carefully. 9. Amazon Prime is not using its marketing resources enough, which goes back to 7.
Yeah, that's basically the same as 7.
Who does Gervonta Davis really appeal to? I'll tell you who he appeals to. Street urchin, lowlives and thugs, bums, filth, the garbage and dredges of society. And these are the people that he's marketed to, and these are the people that are supposed to buy pay-per-views.
Piece of shit like you can't sell unless you attach your name to somebody.
Because you're a degenerate, and you only appeal to degenerates, not hard-working Americans spending their money, spending their dollars to watch boxing. You only appeal to bums.
Garbage.
So will this be enough to draw Gervonta Davis out and into a Vasyl Lomachenko fight on the premise that if you want to keep making serious money, you're going to need to fight serious people with fan bases of their own that spend money of their own, because you by yourself. Being a face of boxing and being called that is not just some handle, some designation that doesn't come with parameters, something that doesn't mean anything. What it means to be the face of boxing is you draw the most money, generate the most business to the sport because of the popularity of your fights. This fight was unpopular.
Like most of Gervonta Davis's fights, you think people will call in their mother that he knocked out Hector Garcia?
Or Rolly Romero, that he decisioned Isaac Cruz? Are these his milestones? His big wins in the sport of boxing?
This is what's supposed to get him into the Hall of Fame?
Oh, I forgot. He's not after fame, and he's not really after legacy. He's after money. Well, if you're after money, the same applies. You're gonna have to fight better people.
So him fighting today's Vasyl Lomachenko, it is a distinct possibility because Loma is a lot older than he used to be, slower.
Safer, I would say, than he was 5 or 6 years ago.
It could happen.
But it could also happen to where maybe Gervonta Davis fights Isaac Cruz. Isaac Cruz is still over there on PBC Island. If he makes it past Rayo,
Here comes Gervonta Davis to sponge off the Mexican fans.
then pretend like he's selling the event all by himself. That's the gimmick.
That's what Floyd used to do.
That's literally what Floyd Mayweather used to do. Now, granted that Floyd was a part of the biggest pay-per-views the sport has ever seen, but he didn't sell them by himself.
He had high-profile dance partners, which is what Gervonta Davis is missing.
Floyd Mayweather in his day was the top earning boxer in the sport. Gervonta Davis isn't.
Nor has he ever been.
Nor will he ever be if he doesn't step it up and fight real people, real fighters.
That's where him and Floyd Mayweather, his former mentor, stand apart. Floyd did fight the real fighters of his era, many of them.
Whereas Gervonta has been protected, shielded from them for many, many years now. So, I mean, we'll see. Maybe he fights Loma. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he fights Isaac again to sponge off the Mexican fans. Upstairs in the men's welterweight division, per a tweet from Mike Kopinger, Montes Stanionis has signed a multi-fight extension with the PBC per sources. He's also parted ways with longtime manager Shelly Finkel. The undefeated welterweight is expected to be elevated to recognized champion, with Terence Crawford set to fight at 154. PBC is looking at a unification with Mario Barrios in one of the next 2 fights. Barrios is still in talks to fight Manny Pacquiao this fall.
Not what I expected.
So in my previous video, we talked about Montes Stanionis' comments in reference to his last fight. In his own words, he said that he was fighting for his freedom, and you got the sense that, well, he was looking for a change.
Change of decorum, maybe?
Change of some kind, and the only thing that seems to have really changed is that he's not with Shelly Finkel anymore, but he's still on the PBC side of things. The PBC side of the street, angling for a Mario Barrios fight.
Not very smart.
Not really, because unless you're going to get Mario Barrios in your next fight, you may end up playing the waiting game. If he ends up fighting Manny Pacquiao in the fall, what do? Do they get you a fight?
Stay busy.
Stanionis has only fought once, just once, in the last 2 years. We know that a part of that is because he was supposed to fight Virgil Ortiz, but then he got sick, then Virgil got sick, and they both ended up losing a lot of time because of that.
But even with that, they should have been able to get a Stanionis back out there and keep him busy, and they didn't.
They didn't get him back out there up until recently, just a few weeks ago this year. He's in a pole position to be elevated to full WBA champion, and what he's angling for is a unification match with Mario Barrios, though he could have had a similar situation on the top rank side of things with more security that they would keep him active, keep him busy, to then maybe unify titles with Brian Norman. Brian Norman is to the WBO what a Stanionis is to the WBA. They're both in a pole position to be elevated to full champions. So if you would have went to top rank, there would have been less variables.
Who knows when a Stanionis' next fight is going to be?
Similar situation with Matchroom, to where if he would have went with Matchroom, they could have gotten him another fight while he waits for the winner of Boots Ennis versus David Avanesian, that you would have had more security there, that you're going to get a fight date while you wait for a big unification match. But as it stands, he stayed at the PBC, and there's no telling when the next time the PBC will get him back out.
No telling how long that's going to take, because they ain't got that many fight dates. They're not doing that many shows.
The PBC are said to be doing a show in August that will feature Caleb Plant, that will feature Stephen Fulton. They're said to be doing a show in August. Then they're supposed to be doing another show in the fall, Sebastian Fundora versus Errol Spence.
It's another show.
And I'm going to assume that Mario Barrios versus Manny Pacquiao would be another.
You don't think they would bunch them all together? Spence versus Fundora and Pacquiao versus Barrios?
Like what they just did with Gervonta Davis and David Benavidez, those two fighting on the same show? I don't know. Maybe. But because they're not doing that many shows this calendar year, it makes it all that much more unwise for a Stanionis to have stayed over there. That if you would have went somewhere else, Top Rank, Matchroom, you would have had more security that because they're doing more shows and they have more fight dates, you'll have the opportunity to have more fights. And he needs them because he has a lot of time.
He's got a lot of lost time to make up for.
This is not good news for Jaron Ennis, and this is not good news for Brian Norman. That if 2 of the 4 major titles at this weight are over there at the PBC, you ain't got access to them.
That's what that means.
I don't get the sense that Boots is going to get the opportunity to unify with anybody this calendar year. Same applies to Brian Norman, if and when he's elevated to full WBO champion. This is not good news for them.
That Amontis is staying over there? And why is Stanionis staying over there? Because Mario Barrios is a more winnable fight than a fight with either of them.
I don't have anything against Mario Barrios. I'm just saying that he seems like low-hanging fruit to a lot of people.
Stanionis included.
So maybe a part of the reason he stayed over there is because he figures, hey, I can pick up Mario Barrios' title, then circle back for the other two. That fight's more winnable than the other two.
Might be what he's thinking.
He's waiting for Mario Barrios. That's the look of it. And finally, in men's super middleweight news, per the desk of the World Boxing Council, the World Boxing Council's Board of Governors has approved the extension of 2 weeks requested by David Benavidez with regards to his decision to confirm in which weight category he will decide to continue his boxing career.
Because he's interim champion at 2 weights, 168 and 175, but looks like they're not going to let him hold on to both at the same time.
They're giving him a little bit more time to think about it, though not but a few days ago we talked about how Samson Lukowicz, David Benavidez's longtime promoter, stated that their priority is still Canelo. It's still the Canelo Alvarez fight in spite of them having just made their light heavyweight debut. So I saw Jim Lampley, longtime commentator Jim Lampley. At first he said that he actually liked David Benavidez's chances should he one day move up to heavyweight. Whereas after the Vajdik fight, he said that he would be the underdog in a Dmitry Bivol fight at light heavyweight. It seems he's changed his mind. How could you like his chances at heavyweight, but you don't really like his chances at light heavyweight against the light punching light heavyweight? Because Dimitri's not known for power.
I saw Juan Manuel Marquez say after the Vajdik fight that he would like to see David go back to 168.
That can't be because of how great he just looked at 175. No, he didn't look great at 175. In spite of the gaslighting, the biased commentary during the fight with Vazdik, and the biased scoring, underneath it all, people know that David didn't look like a monster with Vazdik, and Vazdik's 37 years old.
He's a good fighter.
But he is 37 years old, and he's not the biggest threat. He's not the biggest threat to David Benavidez at 175. No, that was just the taste of what's waiting for David at that weight. And he must not like it. Not if he needs more time to think what he wants to do. That if he felt good and he felt great fighting Vazdik, then the decision would be easy.
I'm staying up here.
I'm not going to keep killing myself to make 168, waiting for Canelo. I'm going to stay at light heavyweight. I'm going to stay at 175.
He's thinking about it. He needs 2 more weeks to think about it.
It's all centered around Canelo. It is all centered around a Canelo-Alvarez fight and whether or not he's going to get it. I've held off on talking about Canelo and whatever he's going to do next because it's a boring conversation I'm tired of having. Rumor has it he's paid William Skull to step aside.
The IBF's mandatory challenger?
He's paid that guy to stand down and step aside so he can fight somebody else. But who is that somebody else? Some people think it's going to be Edgar Berlanga. I'm not a fan of the Edgar Berlanga fight. I don't think Edgar Berlanga deserves a Canelo-Alvarez showdown. Not more than David.
And you guys know I'm not a fan of David.
But Edgar doesn't deserve that fight with Canelo more than David. And I, as a consumer, I, as a boxing fan, I don't want to see Canelo versus Berlanga more than I want to see Canelo versus Benavidez. The Benavidez fight is the fight that I would prefer. So if he paid William Skull to step aside, I can only hold out hope that it's for David Benavidez and not Edgar Berlanga.
But if it turns out to be Berlanga, then David is fucked.
He's fucked. Because that will then mean that Canelo has left you with little choice but to keep campaigning at 175. And I know he doesn't want to. He'd prefer to be the big fish in a small pond, the big man on campus at 168, instead of being on even terrain with guys at 175.
He's stuck between a rock and a hard cock.
It's a hard place.
A cock and a hard face?
A rock and a hard place.
Either way, he's fucked.
And I don't know what he's going to do, because so much of what he means to do is centered around Canelo and whatever decision Canelo Alvarez makes. Does he want to fight David in September? That doesn't actually bode well for David if he has to boil down to 168 as soon as September.
Because he just fought at 175.
To then have to turn around and make 168 by September, that will weaken him. That will surely weaken him. That works in Canelo Alvarez's favor, and that's always been my prediction, that Canelo Alvarez beats him for a good number of reasons, because one, David hasn't actually faced any punchers at 168. Canelo would literally be the biggest puncher he's ever fought, and the weight, making the weight, sooner or later, boiling down to 168 is going to catch up to him.
Because he's been doing that for too long.
I actually hope he gets the Canelo Alvarez fight he's been vying for such a long time, because I want to watch him lose.
Need it?
I want it!
I hope we get Canelo versus Benavidez soon.